Hey y'all, it's Cheyenne Daniels, race and politics reporter for The Hill, and this is The Switch Up. Today, we're bringing you a special election episode. On Tuesday evening, Angela Alsobrooks won the Democratic primary for Maryland's open Senate seat. The race between the Prince George's County Executive and sitting Representative David Trone was one of the nation's most contentious. Though Trone, the co-owner of Total Wine, had led the race for some time, in part because of tens of millions of dollars in advertising, Alsobrooks was the favorite of the state's Democratic establishment, including Governor Wes Moore. Alsobrooks won with 54% of the vote on Tuesday, according to a projection from Decision Desk HQ. She now moves on to the general election in November. If she wins, Alsobrooks would become the first Black woman to represent the Old Line state in the Senate, and only the fourth Black woman to ever serve in the upper chamber. The Switch Up sat down with Alsobrooks ahead of the primary election, where we chatted about the history she could make. Take a listen. Well, Miss Angela Alsobrooks, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling great, and thank you so much for talking with me today. Very exciting times. You know, we're 90 days away
Yes.
from our election. Can you believe that? This
Yes.
is great. Yeah.
So a couple of things. So we are going to get into this right away because in case anybody doesn't know, there is a very real possibility that you will make history in 90 days. As you said, 90 days. Just talk to me a little bit about what you're feeling in this moment as those days start ticking down a little bit more now.
Well, I mean, I think I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I recognize, given the amount of work that it's taken for our campaign to move forward, I am so grateful for all of the people who also ran legs of this race, the people whose shoulders we stand on. I think about Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm. You have to think about Carol Mosley Braun and Kamala Harris. You know, you don't get here accidentally, and so it's really exciting for me to be able to speak the messages and speak the lives of Marylanders. Because, by the way, I understand that all of us want the same things, and so I am also speaking to the lives and livelihoods of people all across our country who don't generally have the opportunity to speak in these spaces. So this is a real honor for me, and it's been very exciting. It really has.
I think something that you just hit on was so important, which is how many across America voices aren't heard, and we know especially for Black Americans and especially for Black women. But at the same time, I think about what we've been seeing over these last few years with record numbers of Black candidates running. I think about, everybody, we always talk about Stacey Abrams, but then I also think about Deirdre DeGier in Iowa, and I think about Sherry Beasley in North Carolina, and this sort of moment that seems to be overtaking our country right now, where we are seeing Black folks running, and our Congressional Black Caucus having its biggest membership. Talk to me a little bit about what do you think is happening right now that is driving Black Americans to say, I'm going to run, but I'm also going to win when I run.
What we know is that progress happens even in the midst of difficulty. So what we are accustomed to recognizing are all of the challenges, the systemic issues, the barriers. And then I am clear from my own experience that progress happens and must happen simultaneously. And that's what we have seen. And that progress doesn't happen by accident either. Remember, you just mentioned Sherry Beasley. I'm well aware that this race has been made easier because of Sherry Beasley's efforts in her race. The donors, the others across the country who are now looking out for candidates. Sherry Beasley was such a solid candidate, well qualified in her own right. And so she has made the case for why someone like me should have an opportunity. And that is what I hope to do as well. And the thing I also have to tell you, Cheyenne, is that I have come to recognize, especially where women are concerned, is that I'm running and I am so well aware and so proud of the history and significance of my race as a Black woman. But there are people all across the country whose lived experience have nothing whatsoever to do with their gender or their race. It has more to do with the messaging and the message of hardworking, everyday Americans. much like my parents. My mother, who is retired as a receptionist, my father, who was a newspaper delivery person and a car salesman, my grandmother, who was a housekeeper. I take their stories and experiences forward with me because what I know is that at the end of all of this, we want the same things for our families. I don't care where you are in Maryland, for example, our watermen and fishermen, the people who are in the rural parts or the urban parts. There is this beauty I have come to see is like, oh, you know what? All of our families really do want the same things, no matter how we came to the experience. And so it's been just, great for me also to recognize I'm fighting for all of us, and while also acknowledging the special, beautiful history that is present in this moment. It's magic, as you mentioned. It's magic.
You were just talking about your own family, and it makes me think about your time in public service. And what was sort of the as Oprah calls it, the aha moment where you said, I want to dedicate my life to being in public. So do you remember, like, was there one sort of moment where you were like, this is what I'm going to do for my career and my life?
I am now working in an area that comes natural to me because the people in my family, I can think about my grandmother. I think my grandmother was the best public servant I ever saw, and she was never elected to anything. But she was a person who I witnessed serve others in her community who were suffering and hurting, the veteran in her neighborhood who suffered as a result of his time in the Vietnam War. I noticed there were others in her communities who suffered from addictions and mental illness and other things, and she made it her business to serve those people. And so this is a tradition that I'm walking in. These were not elected people. So when the moment came for me, I really do remember in law school, I had prior to law school, I had, like a lot of people, a really difficult journey because I was diagnosed early with attention deficit disorder, which made it hard to focus. I had to battle. I remember passing the bar exam, getting through law school and stopping and saying, you know what, I'm going to make sure this counted, that it will count for other people. All of the hard work I have put in, I won't spend a day of my career doing work that doesn't benefit other people and work that makes me jump out of bed in the morning. And I have found that in every moment I have had the opportunity to serve both as domestic violence prosecutor, whether it's been that or as county executive building schools and building health facilities, I've been able to be true to that, is that I didn't want to spend a moment of my time and efforts doing work that didn't serve other people. And in doing so, it has been the greatest joy I have had. I've just loved it. I have loved it.
How do you center yourself amidst all of that to know that even in the exhaustion, you know you're on the right path, you know that this is something you want to keep doing?
Well, I continue to see the benefit of the work. And so if you want to say the fuel that keeps me going is I believe in it. I believe that people deserve to have first chances to be successful. As a prosecutor, I spent time in a courthouse for 13 years watching people who were looking for second chances and then realized that many of them had never gotten the first chance. And so I believe to my core that the people all across our state and all across our country deserve the chance to have an investment in their education early and often, to deserve to live in a place that is safe and affordable, that, when your mother is sick or father is sick or loved one is sick, they deserve to have health care. I don't care what their status is. That health care is a basic human right. And I think when you believe those things in your gut, it's not exhausting to do work you believe in. And even though it takes great effort, I think it should. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to operate in these spaces. And so, we work as hard as we can, but I have to tell you, I have seen the results. We opened our first mental health care and addictions care facility here in 2022. And that came about after I watched 70% of the people that we were arresting and taking to our local departments of correction showed up intoxicated. When I realized that a third of the people we arrest and take to departments of correction on psychotropic medications, it dawned on me that we are arresting and recycling sick and addicted people in these facilities where they can't be healed. And so, what a great victory it was for us to be able to open a place where people actually can go and be healed. So this is why I continue, and what the progression, the work it allows me as a U.S. senator to work for more people, to take the experiences I've had, which is a results oriented kind of executives are results oriented. The attitude that I'm here to get things done, take that to the Senate and serve people across the state and honestly across the nation. That's what senators do. You serve not only the people of your state, but one of 100 means that when I look back at people like my grandmother or the people that she served, I can see some of those people everywhere across the country. They need a fighter too, someone who understands their concerns and who can fight for them.
I think about some of the things that you were just mentioning, such as healthcare, right? As you mentioned, sort of having that moment where it dawns on you the cycle that we sometimes aren't aware of, but sometimes our society just creates because of the programs that aren't in place or aren't being utilized. And I think about all that, but I also think about how we're in this moment of intense polarization, where the idea of universal healthcare to some is like horrifying, right? And it's, so that's money out of my pocket that you want to take to pay for somebody maybe who is struggling with addiction, right? How do you look to communicate and explain and bridge that divide between that polarization to say it's not just about we're trying to take money from you to put into, in some people's mind, a drug addict's pocket. How do you find that middle ground to try to talk to everybody?
There is a culture of fear that was fed by the former president, Trump. And I think that fear caused people to view each other with suspicion, and this whole scarcity mentality that was allowed to develop. I believe instead that, when those among us who are in need do better, it makes our whole country better. So that, we serve people who need health care. It makes those people healthier. But guess what? It makes our country healthier too. To have a system where people are healthy, to have a system where people can sit down in the evening because they have jobs and growing income and do homework with their children. It makes their children more successful. And guess what else becomes more successful? Our country. When you have thriving communities, safe and healthy people, it makes for a healthier state and it makes for a healthier country. And so we all benefit from the success of others, and there is no scarcity that people are so afraid of. It all really does make us better, but we need people who speak in those terms, who are collaborative and who are understanding. My father often told me that how you see something depends on where you sit. So there are people whose fears and whose concerns are based on their own experiences. And I think it's important to have leaders who don't demonize people who disagree with you or who see it differently, but who are always looking for ways to make all of us better. That's where I am. I just want to deliver what my constituents need. I want to make their lives better. And I think by extension, we make all of us better.
Thinking about where we are right now, the concerns that are on voters' minds, and obviously for myself, I focus a lot, being race and politics reporter, on where Black voters' concerns are at this moment. And we hear the economy, we hear about which also goes with employment, concerns over job availability, job opportunities. We're also hearing about education is a big one, and that might be education for what's being taught in our schools, but also education for college affordability and student loan relief and things of that nature. What are you hearing as you've been on the campaign trail in just from Maryland voters of where their concerns, what their top issues are in this moment?
Across Maryland, every community I go to, I think the number one issue I hear about is economic opportunity. The opportunity to have jobs, to have a living wage, to be able to afford the cost of groceries, to be able to afford the cost of housing, to have access to health care. I go to the rural parts of the state where healthcare is a real challenge right now, trying to attract primary care physicians. I'll tell you an example. There was a woman I spoke with who said, listen, my husband has prostate cancer. It took us 9 months to see a specialist because we don't have the healthcare we need here, or that it took an hour for an ambulance to arrive, or the parts of the state that say, we want to make sure our kids' education is fully funded. And so they're concerned about the kinds of investments that we're going to make in education and whether it's fair and equal across communities, whether or not your zip code determines the quality of your education. Those are the kinds of concerns I hear about. And to your point, it's mainly what is at the kitchen tables of most people. That's what I'm hearing about. I talked to a number of college students who said, you all are talking, we need to make sure that as a party, when we start talking about an improving economy, until you tell me that I'm going to be able to have a job that allows me to afford to live someplace safe, until you tell me that I can afford my everyday needs. But this is what I'm hearing in our communities. And you know what, in real economic opportunity, meaning businesses, funding small local and minority businesses, women-owned businesses, minority businesses, veterans, all of them wanted, these are the concerns I'm hearing, is whether or not this will be an economy that allows all of us to be able to afford what our families need. That's it across every community I've gone to. And that is true also in African American and in the communities here. This is a predominantly African American county, and that's what I hear all across our county too, and across the state.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that is extrapolated across all 50 states, especially as you're saying, job opportunity. That is a huge thing. Economic prosperity. Like how likely are we to be able to have a job? If I graduate from college, will a job be waiting for me so I can pay off those student loans, or am I going to be stuck with the student loans and a minimum wage job? And there's so many things I think that are on folks' minds at this time, but especially with young voters. And there's been such a fascination, I think, especially these last couple of elections, with the power of young voters. And so I would love to ask you, think about your own race right now, your own campaign, and even looking ahead to what we're going to see in November. How do you see the role of young voters at this moment in time? And those young voters, I think of young voters anywhere from like 18 to about 24, 25. Like, what are you looking to see from young voters, but what are you seeing right now from them and the power that they're bringing to the ballot box?
Oh, the young voters are not only powerful at the voting box, but they are also going to lead our communities forward. Many of these issues that concern us today, even the ones around freedom and justice and really preserving our way of life, voting rights, for example, young voters are well aware that there is a concerted effort to roll back their rights. They watched it in places like Georgia, which is why it was so great to see the case that came out where the elections workers who were intimidated, where there was accountability there. Choice is a major issue for younger voters, especially young women who recognize that we are now fighting a fight that, quite frankly, should have been won by their grandmothers. That young people have to worry about where to live. A young woman has to worry about whether or not to locate to a state where literally your freedom may be abridged, where you may not have the rights that you'd have in another state, whether your right to privacy will be respected, whether you can make decisions about abortion care if you decide to do that, whether or not that will be safe for you and legal. And again, young voters are showing up and saying, we demand to be heard. We demand to have our concerns addressed. You mentioned student debt, racking up student debt that disables so many of our students from being able to pursue their passions. So I agree with what we've seen in terms of capping the forgiving a portion of student debt. Again, making sure that the core issues, housing, mobility, those issues are issues that young voters want to hear about. And they want us to, the freedoms, human rights. These are really astute voters, and they want to make sure that the values that we espouse as a country, democracy, freedom, human rights, and justice, are ones that we actually show by way of the kinds of legislation we pass. And that's what I will be focused on.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, how socially conscious young voters are, at this moment in time. There's this very big, I think, and this is not all young voters, but there's definitely, I think, a young voters are starting to lean more progressive, is what it starts to sound like we're hearing, which is incredible in a lot of ways, just to think about the shifts in our cultures over time. But one of the things that you had mentioned was about the mother-daughter duo in Georgia who had faced harassment and threats. And sadly, that is not something that legislators aren't familiar with. We've been seeing that happening, particularly toward our female legislators, especially toward our legislators of color. Can you just talk a little bit about if you have any concerns of that, as you continue this campaign, and if it is your name that is called and read out 90 days from now?
Well, Marylanders are, I think, unique voters. We just elected the only African American governor in the country, and his lieutenant governor is an Indian American woman, and so we have a very different electorate who I think look at issues, look at the record, and who look again at what you're going to deliver. They want to know that we have a person in office who has a record of delivering results and accomplishment. So Marylanders are able to look at that. They want a person who's speaking to their issues. They want to know, again, what's going to happen with the economy. Will you fight to bring resources back to our state so that we can grow jobs here and income? So I am not concerned, to answer your question, that on election night, somehow the results will not be received by Marylanders, because I think they have proven to be leaders across the country, that we have very, very astute and engaged voters. And so it's going to be my job between now and May 14th to try to meet as many of them as I can where they are. And I'm convinced that when they begin, more and more of them to come to know me, to understand the work that I have done, and to know that I share their lived experiences and their concerns, that their families' concerns and aspirations for our state are mine, and that I, again, have a record of having fought for those things and delivered on them. I think that they're going to be persuaded by it, and I look forward to serving as a senator from Maryland.
When was the moment you said, I'm going to run for the Senate? What do you remember? Was it a conversation you had with somebody else, or was it sort of an internal conversation? Like, how did you come to the decision to say, I'm doing this campaign?
Didn't have a whole lot of time to think about it, because this came about as a seat opening up. And so that was the other thing, is that, we had a retirement. You had 5 minutes to decide whether or not you wanted to fight to be able to represent the whole state. And that was a choice I made, didn't have a lot of time to make it, but said yes. This is something that I'm interested in. And I had a number of people who are also saying, what they wanted to see me serve on a different level in our state, and wanted to support that they were really happy with what I'd done, particularly here during COVID. For example, I led my community of about 1 million, the second largest jurisdiction in the state. And there were a number of people who were really happy with the work that I've done, and said, what, we'd like to see you and serve the whole state. So the answer is yes. And here we are.
We keep hearing reports about how voters, they don't have trust in our elected officials. They don't have trust in our media too. And there's just this sense of a falling, not just approval rating, but that sense that I know that my elected officials have our best interests at heart. They're looking out for America. They're looking out for the world. How do you see not just yourself, but your colleagues of elected officials, stepping forward to begin to rebuild that trust that for the American people?
Well, I think it's hard to represent people you don't know or understand. And what is important is that you are there, present on the ground with everyday hardworking people. It takes a lot of effort to be present in those communities and to speak the language of the people that you represent. And by that, I mean speak their lived experience. It's one thing to say, I know theoretically there's something about healthcare. There's another thing for me personally, which is what I'm able to say, to care for aging parents, to say, I understand the concern you have about affording insurance, because I have parents who are aging and who have that same concern. I know what it is to be concerned about affording the out-of-pocket cost of prescription drugs, not theoretically speaking, but in real life. Like, my lived experience is often very similar to the people I represent, and that develops a different level of trust.
Have there been any moments where you kind of wanted to throw your hands up and go, you know what, I'm tired. This campaign is a lot. I want to go back to what I was doing. Have there been those moments at all?
You know what? Not that I wanted to give up, but I can tell you, it is exhausting. This is not easy work. I think the thing you realize is it never ends. It's 7 days a week. The work is from when I get up to when I go to bed at night. And so it's a really, really difficult effort. It takes a lot of energy. And you know what? I think it should. I think the honor of being one of 100 is a big one. I think it should require all the effort you have. I'm giving it all the effort I have. And it is takes, you got to be fit for it. You really do. And I feel really grateful that I have the energy for it and that I have a whole bunch of people who are running the race with me. I'm not in this alone. The governor has endorsed me, Senator Van Hollen, our entire congressional delegation except one are supporting me. I have people from all across the state. Emily's List has jumped in to really help significantly in Citizens United. We've had really tremendous support and help. So I'm not running it alone. On the ground, the grassroots energy and support has been off the chain. I mean, we had a men's group come together for me last weekend, close to 200 in Baltimore, who were fired up. When I drove up, they were already ramped up. They're ready to go. So I'm not alone in this.
I'm Cheyenne Daniels, race and politics reporter for The Hill. And from all of us at The Hill, thanks for listening to this episode of The Switch Up. We'll have more episodes delving into the intersection of race and politics soon, so be sure to follow The Hill on all social media platforms at THEHILL. The Switch Up was created, written, and produced by me. Script editing for this episode by Steph Thomas. Our booking producer is Casey Brady.